Well, the prosecution and defense have rested their cases in the trial of Derek Chauvin. It's winding down in Minneapolis. Yesterday, the former police officer invoked his Fifth Amendment right, declining to testify. The court is now in recess until Monday, when both sides will present their closing arguments. So for more detailed legal analysis, I want to bring in criminal defense attorney Julie Rendelman. She's also a former homicide prosecutor. So you have been on both sides of this in the courtroom. Thanks for joining us. Derek Chauvin decided not to testify yesterday. What are the benefits and perhaps the negatives that may come out of that decision for him?
It's a great question, and I think everyone was waiting in anticipation for this one moment. Will he or will he not testify? Now, the big benefit of him not testifying is the obvious one. He doesn't get to be cross-examined, and I promise you, if the prosecution had had an opportunity to cross-examine him, it would have been brutal. I mean, think about it. The prosecution would have brought him through 9 minutes and 29 seconds to try to explain himself through every second. And I'll be honest, I don't think that there would have been any chance of him really being able to explain himself. And so that's one of the reasons why I think it would have been very, very difficult for him to testify. On the other hand, the one benefit he would have had is, jurors view him as the guy or the monster, some people view, in that video. And it would have given him a voice, perhaps not a great voice, but be able to have the jury hear him as human for the first time. And perhaps at the same time explain what his mental status was at the time, to explain away the intent for the assault and say, I in no way intended to hurt this man. I thought I was doing my job. And so he does miss out on those opportunities, but who knows at this point what the jury will say.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting observation. When we heard him speak very briefly yesterday, myself and my co-anchor on the 9 o'clock show, Vlad, we sort of commented on what we expected him to sound like. And did he sound the way we had expected? Because, all we have heard from him is in that video. So, yeah, I suppose, an opportunity missed, or perhaps, an opportunity, or perhaps he saved himself. Only time will tell. I want to ask you about some other stuff that we heard yesterday. After the defense rested, the prosecution recalled Dr. Martin Tobin. He's a respiratory systems expert who testified earlier in the trial. He was there as a rebuttal witness. He rebutted some of the testimony that the defense's witness, a forensic pathologist named Dr. David Fowler, gave on Wednesday regarding Floyd's carbon monoxide levels. Let's just play some of that sound.
Do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty as to whether this statement, that Mr. Floyd's carboxyhemoglobin could have increased by 10 to 18%, is reliable?
No, I believe it is not reliable.
As to the statement that his carboxyhemoglobin could have increased by 10 to 18%, in your view, that's not possible?
It's simply wrong.
Okay, so what's the significance of Tobin's testimony?
What a brilliant decision on the part of the prosecution to bring him back. And I say that because, social media has been crazy about this doctor. They seem to love him. And the assumption is that the jury does too. There's something about his intellect, his charm, even his accent that has endeared himself to millions. And so I think one of the smartest things, regardless if he had anything to say, was to bring him back to be the last face that the jury sees on this case. Because I believe they believe in him. And so in simple terms, all he did was contradict one area of the defense expert, which is whether or not carbon monoxide had anything to do whatsoever with the death of George Floyd. And simply put, Tobin said, absolutely not. And that was it. And that's how they rested their case.
So the judge also rejected the prosecution's request to present new evidence during a rebuttal case of evidence of blood gas readings regarding the carbon monoxide levels that would have been found in George Floyd's blood. Why did the judge make that decision? Do you think it was the right decision?
It's a great question. I was a prosecutor and now I'm a defense attorney. One of the most important things is to make sure that a prosecutor provides all the discovery and provides it in a timely fashion so that the defense has a right to use that discovery in the defense of their case. In this case, the prosecutor brought out suddenly a lab report that had been created months and months and months ago that had never been provided to the defense. And they wanted to be able to bring in Chauvin and introduce that lab report. Well, the judge said, absolutely not. The defense had a right to this discovery months ago. I'm not going to allow you to kind of do that trial by ambush, is what we would call it in the defense field. And therefore, Chauvin can testify, but he cannot refer in any way, shape, or form to that lab.
The trial continues Monday with closing arguments. What do you expect we will hear?
We're going to hear a lot. I think we're going to hear the prosecution meticulously go through each of the charges to explain how each and every piece of evidence, from the experts to the bystanders to law enforcement, corroborate and support each and every one of those elements. They're going to try to explain away some of the inconsistencies with their medical experts, because keep in mind, they have the burden of proving not only that Derek Chauvin caused the death of George Floyd, but also that he is culpable, whether it be the negligence in manslaughter 2, the murder 3, depraved mind, or the highest count, which is the most difficult count, which is the intent to assault, which I think is going to be a problem for the prosecution. On the defense side, they have a lot of options. They don't have the burden. I think that they're going to do many things. One, I think they're going to say the people did not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt because we are not clear about the cause of death. And then they're going to use their use of force expert to explain that what Chauvin did was proper and reasonable.
Julie Rendelman, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.